Today I want to talk to you about finding freedom. There is a couple named Isaac and Rebecca. They get pregnant with twins. And it says inside of her womb is a wrestling match. She gives birth to two boys. The first boy is born, and the first baby that comes out is hairy. Like he's got a lot of hair on his body. So his mama decided to name the baby Harry or Esau. So I don't know if when you were naming your kids or if you think about other people naming their kids, like would you choose the body features of your kid to choose their name? Seems a little strange to me. Well, Esau is born, and then comes the second baby. Well, the second baby, his hand comes out first holding onto the heel of the firstborn baby. And so they named him Heel Grabber. The other meaning for the name is deceiver, manipulator, supplanter. So there's a lot of identity in our names, and if you're this boy whose name is Jacob, for the rest of your life, everyone looks at you, and what they're saying in Hebrew is deceiver, and you're reminded all the time that you are the deceiver, supplanter, heel grabber. You see, in the culture back then, if you were the firstborn, you would get a double portion of the inheritance when your dad died. They would split up dad's inheritance among all of the sons, but the firstborn son gets a double portion. And then there would be a blessing that would go on that firstborn that would make them in charge of the entire family. They would have rights. So Jacob's going to grow up. At some point, Esau's going to be the head of his family, and his older brother, by 30 seconds, gets to tell him what he gets to do and can't do for the rest of his life. So early on in his world, that's what happens. He gets a label put on him of a deceiver. And I think in our lives, all of us have had some labels put on us. The labels that other people put on. When I was a kid, I loved baseball. And I was good. I wasn't awesome, but I was good. And I was usually the second or third batter because I could usually get on base and get around the bases. Like I would never hit it out of the park, but I could usually get on base. I was quick, so I could get around the bases quickly. And we make it all the way to the championship game. And I'm ready. Like I'm pumped up. I'm excited. I'm going to have the game. I'm going to make ESPN as a 9-year-old. I bat 3 times. My first 2 at bats, I get on base and I make it around the bases and I score. Third time at bat, I strike out. Our team wins the championship. We won it all. And after the game, I get my trophy and I get the medal. And I go up to my dad, expecting my dad to say, "Son, I'm so proud of you. Great job. Man, you scored twice. You scored more than anyone else on your team." And my dad, in a sarcastic moment, he just said, "Why'd you strike out?" I went home. I took the trophy and I took the medal. We had a pond behind my house, and I threw the trophy and the medal in the water. And I walked away from that pond with a label of not enough. I had a great dad growing up, but sarcasm marked me. And I just grew up thinking I would never be enough for my dad. That it didn't matter how good of grades that I got, it wasn't good enough. It didn't matter how hard I worked on his job sites, it probably wasn't going to be good enough. And I just made this internal vow for the rest of my life, I'm probably just not going to measure up. I would imagine every one of you here today, you've probably got your own version of this label. Someone said something to you. A teacher, a parent, a friend, an enemy. And you walked away trying to prove that you weren't that person. In fact, I've been a youth pastor and a young adult pastor for a long time. I've been working with young people. And I've worked with a lot of young ladies. Me and my wife have done a lot of counseling. And oftentimes, this is the story. A single young adult female comes up to us and she says, "Hey, Brandon, so there's these 2 guys." There's always 2. There's there's one guy, he's godly, but he isn't cute. But then there's this other guy. Oh, he's fine. He's got that permanent tan. He's got that six-pack. The boy looks good, but he ain't godly. And in her mind, this is what she's thinking. It'd probably be easier to make the cute guy godly than to make the ugly guy cute. And you know what I found? That story never turns out well. You know how many women I've met that they're like, I'll make this guy my project. Some of you married your project. Don't look at him right now. This is not your moment. This is not the moment to nudge or point. This is the moment when you just look forward like, that wasn't you, honey, and ever. You were never on project. I've never found the project story turning out the way that she thought it would. Or then I meet people that they buy things that they can't afford to impress people they don't even like. You know what I'm talking about? You ever go down Sunrise at 5 o'clock and you watch where that guy, he came out making $14 an hour, but he's driving the brand new Tesla? You're like, well, I know why you can't afford to pay your rent. You're driving it. Bad plan. But Jacob wanted power and influence. And he was willing to do whatever it took to get it. See, the two boys grow up, and Esau is hairy, and he's a man's man. He's a real hunter. Not like modern day hunter, where you can put deer urine on yourself and from a mile away with a scope shoot a deer. He grew up in a time where it was he had a version of a butter knife, and he'd strip down and he'd chase the deer down on foot, stab it, and then drag it home. Esau was straight out of Duck Dynasty, okay? He's a man's man. Jacob, the Bible tells us, was good in the kitchen. This boy belonged on Cupcake Wars. Well, his dad preferred Duck Dynasty over Cupcake Wars when it came to his son. So he loved Esau. He cherished Esau. But Mama liked the boy that was good in the kitchen. And Mama was going to do whatever it takes to give Jacob opportunities that Esau should have gotten. And he grows up with this complex of not feeling like he was enough. And one day his brother shows up and he's like, Jacob, I'm so hungry I think I'm going to die. Jacob's like, all right, I'll make you a deal. I actually made your favorite soup today. And if you give me your birthright, when Dad dies, I get a double portion of the inheritance, I'll give you a bowl of soup. And I'm sure Esau in this moment's like that'll stick. Mom and Dad will believe I'd trade my birthright for a bowl of soup. But he makes the agreement. He's manipulated his brother. The story continues, and Isaac, the dad, is getting ready to die. He's at the end of his life, and the boys know it's coming, and Isaac's actually lost most of his eyesight. And he calls in Esau, and he says, Esau, I'm getting ready to die. I want you to go, and I want you to go hunt something, kill something, drag it home, and I want you to prepare for me my favorite meal. And when you do, I'm going to pray a blessing on you, and that blessing is going to give you the rights to the family. You're going to be in charge from now on. So Mr. Duck Dynasty, he goes out and goes hunting. Well, Mama overhears the conversation, and she's like, this is my moment. I'm going to get Jacob the blessing. So she goes to Jacob and says, Jacob, we're going to prepare your dad's favorite meal. And while your brother's out hunting, we're going to make you look like Esau. And that's where our story picks up. Genesis 27 says, so Jacob went out and got the young goats for his mother. And Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal, just the way that Isaac liked it. And then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were in the house, and gave them to her younger son Jacob. She covers his arms and the smooth parts of his neck with the skin of a young goat. And then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, and including freshly baked bread. So Jacob took the food to his father. My father, he said. I'm sure he was like, my father, trying to talk like his older brother. Yes, my son. Who are you? Esau? or Jacob?" Jacob replied, "It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you've told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat so you can give me your blessing." And Jacob said, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" Now, Isaac might not be able to see very well, but he knows something's not right. So he asks Jacob to come forward. And his answer is unique. He says, "The Lord your God put it in my path." Notice he didn't say the Lord my God or the Lord our God. He said the Lord your God. So Jacob not only feels disconnected from his dad, he feels disconnected from God. He feels like he doesn't measure up, that everyone else is better than him, everyone else is getting things that he wishes he could have, and life has just dealt him a bad hand. Have you ever felt like life has handed you a bad hand? Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you really are Esau." So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," Isaac said. But he didn't recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. And he asked him one last time, "But are you really my son Esau?" He asked. "Yes, I am," Jacob replied. And Isaac blesses Jacob, giving him the birthright. Esau comes home with the game. He's hunted, he's killed, he's done everything. And he comes to receive the blessing from his dad. He shows up to his dad, and he's like, "Dad, I'm here." He's like, "What do you mean you're here? I just blessed you." He's like, "No, you didn't." He's like, "Well, who was it then?" And immediately Esau knows, "I'm going to kill him." Jacob has this realization. All right, so now I've manipulated my brother for his birthright, and I've just deceived our father so I could get the blessing. I think my brother might just kill me and take both of them back. Have you ever pretended to be someone you're not? Have you ever wished you were somebody else? Because I think the second kind of labels that we struggle with are the labels we pursue. Also, going back to baseball, I'm in middle school now, and I'm trying to prove to the guys that I've got what it takes. And we noticed that there was this really pretty girl up in the bleachers, and we all started talking about who's going to get her attention. And I'm like, "Oh, this is my moment. I'm going to show all of these guys your boy's got game." So it's my turn to go up to bat. I grab my bat. I start strutting. I'm doing my thing. She doesn't notice me. I stand in the batter's box, and I look at this girl, and she finally notices me. And I'm like, "What's up, girl? How you doing?" And then I pointed to the outfield. I'm gonna hit this one for you. And she kind of smiles. And then I look towards the pitcher, not realizing I had already stepped in the batter's box, and he has already thrown a pitch. And the ball nails me in the temple. Everything goes black, and I fall on the plate. Now I have her attention. As I go to the emergency room. And here's what I've learned. Oftentimes, the labels we pursue end up with a lot of pain. You see, Jacob wanted power and influence. And he was willing to compromise his character to get it. But what he learned is God can't bless who we pretend to be. I think comparison is the number one reason why we try to pretend. We strive for things. We try to present ourselves in a certain way, and it's not the way that we really are, but it's what we want people to think about us. And I think one of the things that really hurts us is this thing right here. On this thing is social media. And social media, here's what we do. We go to social media and we pull up Instagram, and you see a picture. Now, before the picture was taken, there was someone who took a selfie. And you know what they did? They held the phone up here. You know why? It stretches out the skin in your neck to make you look thinner. It can actually turn two chins into one chin. And you do like one of these. You're like, all right, what's the perfect lighting? I don't like that side of my face. Did I make sure I'm putting that thing out there like in this big? How do I do it a little tighter? Like, how do we make that happen? And then they snap that perfect pic, and then they take it and then they crop it. They put a filter on it. And if you don't know what a filter is, you shouldn't use Instagram. For real. Put a filter on it, they crop it, and then they craft the perfect caption. And then they hit post. And then we pull out Instagram and we see that picture and we're like, wow, they look amazing. And you look at it when you don't look amazing. And you compare their highlight of their day with the perfectly cropped, posed, filtered picture with the perfect caption to your mundane moment. And you feel lacking. And some of you are like, well, I don't use Instagram. Let's talk about Pinterest. So, mama, you wake up, it's 10 o'clock, and you got all your kids, like you fed everybody. Most of them got dressed. And you're like, it's been a successful day. Nobody's hungry. Everyone that wanted clothes has them on. And then you pull up Pinterest, and you see that mom that's like dressed to the nines, and it's like Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And she's done 13 crafts with her kids already. And as a mama, you're like, I'm pathetic. Let's talk about Facebook. As a dad, you wake up in the morning, it's Saturday. You pull it up, and guess who's up there? That friend that you actually don't like. And he ran a half marathon this morning just because he could. It wasn't a competition. He just wanted to let the world know I ran 13.1 miles today. I'm awesome. And you look at that picture, and you're like, I haven't ran in years. I don't even know if I own shoes like that anymore. In fact, you do one sit-up a day. You do half of it when you wake up, and you do the other half when you go to bed. And we look into someone else's life, their car, their money, their job, their opportunity, their relationships, their kids, and we compare their highlight moment to our normal moment. And oftentimes, the labels that we pursue end up lying to us. And then there's the ER that ruins our life. It's someone's always prettier. They're always happier. They're more popular. They're just better. They're skinnier. And the comparison world causes us to chase labels that we wish that we had. And sometimes you finally get to put on the label, and it doesn't quite have the payoff that you thought it would. How often, in the pursuit of labels, have we ended up with a label we wish we didn't have? And we end up with a third word, the I am fill in the blank. I don't know what your third word is, but when you look in the mirror, you have one. When you think about your life, there's something that comes up, and you might feel like a disappointment, manipulator, a coward, not enough, insecure, less than. In the church world, it's often disqualified, stupid, fat, ugly. I had a teacher one time. See, I'm good with words. I can't sing to save my life, but words are my gift. And what I got was, my teacher called me a manipulator. And I wore it. And I found identity in it. I felt like not only was I not enough, but I'm a deceiver. I use my words to get the outcomes that I'm looking for. Jacob's story doesn't seem to end well. He realizes his brother's going to kill him, and he runs away. And while he's running, he ends up at a well, and he sees a beautiful woman. A woman that's probably way out of his league. And he goes up to her, and he does the only thing that comes to his mind, because if it's the first girl you've really ever interacted with, you usually don't know what to do. So he does something he probably shouldn't have. He kisses her, and then he starts crying. Like if you're the woman, you're like, this just got really awkward. What's your name? You see, he had just found out that she's his cousin. Clearly they're like from Arkansas or Alabama or Louisiana, like got kissing cousins. And he goes to Rachel's dad. He's like, hey, I want to marry your daughter. He's like, what's your bride price? He's like, oh, no. I just ran away from home. I have nothing. See, in this culture, like you'd have to give a dad money to buy the right to marry his daughter. Well, if you just run away from home, you got nothing. He makes him a deal. He's like, how about this? If you work for me for 7 years for free without pay, you can marry Rachel. So he works for 7 years. Gets to the end of the 7 years. It's finally the day. Wedding day has arrived. And he gets hammered. Totally plastered out of his mind. You're like, how do you know that? Here's how. The morning after the wedding night, after he has slept with his new bride, he rolls over expecting to see Rachel, who the Bible lets us know is beautiful in form and figure, only to find it not to be Rachel in his bed. For Rachel had an older sister named Leah, which the Bible lets us know looked homely and was cross-eyed. Thank you, Bible writers. I feel really bad for Leah. For the rest, for all of eternity, her description is homely and cross-eyed. So I liked comedies growing up, and I always put myself in the scene whenever I read the Bible. And there's this guy in the comedy movies that I would watch who was cross-eyed. He when he looked at you, not one of his eyes was actually looking at you, and you didn't really know which eye to kind of make contact with. And I've always imagined Jacob rolling over expecting to see beautiful Rachel, and instead there's this cross-eyed woman going, hey there, big boy. Oh God, what happened? This is terrible. And he goes to his uncle and he's like, you've deceived me. He's finally got what he deserves, right? He spent his whole life getting ready for the moment. He's spent his whole life deceiving people. Finally, the deceiver gets deceived. And Laban, his uncle, says, Jacob, I couldn't let my youngest daughter get married first. I had to let you marry my oldest daughter. But I'll make you a deal. At the end of the week, I'll let you marry Rachel too, if you work for me for another 7 years for free. Jacob agrees. At the end of the week, he marries Rachel. He made sure to get her on the front end of the agreement this time. And then you have the most romantic verse in all of Scripture. It says, those 7 years that he worked for Rachel seemed as only a day. And everyone said, aww. Right? We all have this aw moment, but now he's married to sisters. One he likes and one he doesn't. Can you imagine how dinner went every night? You just got to learn to find the fun in the word dysfunction, right? That's kind of how this story has to play out. Well, Rachel, for whatever reason, can't conceive. So she has an idea. What if I let Jacob sleep with my maidservant? Maybe my maidservant can give him a son on my behalf. So now he's sleeping with 3 women. And Leah eventually stops having kids and makes the same agreement. Now Jacob's married to 4 women. He's got 4 women that he has now had sons with because now all of them are having babies. Now imagine Thanksgiving dinner. This is awkward, right? But in the midst of this, at the end of his 7 years, he starts actually earning some money. And everything that he does seems to just work. He just gets really, really wealthy. And his uncle that he's been working for years just isn't. So Jacob's getting wealthy, his uncle isn't, and finally his uncle has just made it so hard for Jacob to live there that Jacob's like, hey, we're out. And he takes all of his wives, all of his sons, all of his servants, and they pack up to leave to go back home. And in the midst of the journey, he hears that his brother knows about his journey. And his brother has raised up an army of 400 people to come after him. And he has this moment of my past has finally caught up with me. Have you ever come to a place where your past has finally come up with you, come up against you, and you feel like it's an army that stands in front of you? This is Jacob. He doesn't have an army. And then he hears that his uncle has also raised up a smaller army to come up from his backside. And now he has nowhere to go. So he makes another stupid decision. Oftentimes, we make a decision for comfort. He didn't want to lose everything, so he divided up his wives and his sons and all of his property into two groups, thinking that his brother would come and wipe out one of them and go back, and at least he'd have half of his sons, half of his wives, and half of his servants, and half of his flocks. Clearly going for father and husband of the year right now, right? And he's just at his end. What do I do now? Where do we go from here? Have you ever come to a place in your life where you look at the story of where you're at and you're like, I didn't think I'd end up like this? That's Jacob. That's his moment right now. The story picks up. In Genesis 32, it says, "This left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. And when the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. And then the man said, 'Let me go, for the dawn is breaking.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.'" And get this is the key right here. It says, "What is your name?" the man asked. Who are you? The question he's been avoiding his whole life. The image that he's been betraying. Who are you? Same question his dad asked. I share his sentiment because in this moment he feels like a complete disappointment. See, when our past comes back up behind us, oftentimes we have to deal with it. There's the labels of our past. And when it comes to the labels of our past, haven't we given the enemy a lot to work with? When I was in early college, I was addicted to pornography. I've personally lusted after people that I'm not married to. I've hated people so bad that I wished horrible things in their lives. My personal gift is words. So I can make you feel like $1,000,000 and I can make you feel this small. And I've on purpose, knowing what my words would do, chosen words to make people feel small. I struggle with depression to the point where I've considered taking my own life. And that's just the things since I followed Jesus. Sometimes the labels that you wear, you feel like you've deserved. You've earned. And then you have an enemy that continually brings them up inside of your mind. Yours might be different than mine. For some of you, he says, you got foreclosed on. You got fired. You're an adulterer. You're divorced. You're an addict. You're a coward. And you try to be positive, but you know it's just a facade. Because you're trying to present an image you don't really believe about yourself. So what do you do with the labels of your past? What do you do with the labels that you've pursued that haven't turned out the way you thought they should? And the labels that other people put on you. I think many of us in this room believe that God wants to do something good inside of them and through them. But God can't take you where he wants you to go unless he heals the places that you've been.